right, we have a very special guest on here tonight, guys. We have Joedy Cook, a 20-year Army veteran and a former police officer who's had a great long year dedication work of researching dogman and collecting compelling information of this cryptid. Uh, Jody, it's an honor to have you on. Thank you for your service. I'm going to give you the floor. I'm not going to interrupt you. I might have some questions and stuff, but I'm going to try my best not to interrupt you.
Okay.
The floor is yours. You could go anywhere how you want with this, and you could just have a brief introduction of yourself if you like.
Okay. I appreciate it. I've been doing cryptid research and UFO research for close to a little over 30 years now. And I got into it. I was a UFO researcher, did that for a while, um, and started to get into the cryptid stuff. It's kind of expanding out a little bit because, when you're stuck like in one field, it kind of gets boring a little bit, and then you kind of expand out a little bit because I was with this UFO group and we did a now this is back in the 80s. This was like before cable, and you had everybody was doing stuff through public access TV. And we did a live UFO show called UFO Update Live. It was a first Wednesday of every month. It was live from 7 to 8 in the evenings, and we had guests that were on. You could call in and ask questions. And we were just getting a lot of different cryptid sightings. Most of them were Bigfoot. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. So myself and George Clapperson, we decided, let's look into the Bigfoot stuff. This might lead up to something a little bit different. And a lot of these sightings where people were having UFO and Bigfoot sightings together, or they were having Bigfoot sightings where they were UFOs being sighted at. So we decided to take it, and it just, I mean, I fell in love with it. I really did. I mean, I was living Bigfoot. I was putting more time into my research and going out to the field than I was spending with my family. It was really like that, and because you get so obsessed with it, um, you want to read everything you can about it. You want to watch whatever you can about it. Do all kinds of research on it that you can. Go to a library, read up on the books, things like that. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And we did some really good research here in Ohio, and an author reached out to us um, about, you know, doing a book with us on Bigfoot called Bigfoot in Ohio. And it shot up really well. And from there on, I was speaking at conferences, doing, different shows and things. I did a couple TV shows about Bigfoot in Ohio and kind of fell into it. Loved it. Um, but the field, and a lot of people will probably tell you this too, the Bigfoot field really changed. It got to the point got really not so much political, but it turned into a clique, and it was always the same people speaking at the conference. No one wanted to listen to anybody new. No one wanted to um, talk to anyone unless you had the right last name type thing. And it just got to the point, got really ridiculous. And there was a lot of really good researchers out there that were unknown that had really good research and evidence that nobody wanted to take the time to talk to them because, you know, their whole thing is no one's going to go to a conference and see somebody who's a nobody talk. And that's not true because people don't go to these conferences to listen to the person or see the person. They're there to listen to the information the person is putting out. So at the time I was getting real um, upset with the field, you know, and there's been a new cryptid that's been popping around. called Dogman. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me look into that. And again, it was something I really fell into because there was just something about this cryptid that was so different from Bigfoot or any of the other cryptids or even UFOs, and it was really exciting to get into the research because you find out that this creature's different. I mean, the way it acts, by the way it hunts, by the way it terrorizes people is completely different. And you realize that this is an apex predator. Okay. This thing, is deadly. It's not like Bigfoot. Um, and it just, when I'm doing my research, I just, you know, listening to people talk about the fear that they had with their encounters compared to the fear people had with Bigfoot encounters. It was quite different. People when they run into Bigfoot and stuff, it was more of a awe thing, and they weren't really scared. But when it comes to Dogman, these people are terrified. I mean, people are literally crying when they're telling you their experience. And I said, there's something more to this. This is can't be an isolated cryptid. And I just started doing more research around the country, traveling around the country. And I said, this is too big for me. So I started an organization called the North American Dogman Project in 2006, and it just blew up. We've got chapters in all the states. We've got, 700 plus members. Um, it blew up, and we just learned so much, and there's still so much to learn about this cryptid. And it's one of these cryptids now that it's overtaking the Bigfoot stuff. Because there's just so much more sightings that are taking place. And these sightings go back through my research, goes all the way back into like the 1800s and so forth. And so, I go back and I look at my research when I was a Bigfoot researcher, because I remember a couple cases I had where people were seeing a Bigfoot, and this is like the late 80s, early 90s. And they were saying, oh, this Bigfoot had like pointed ears, or this Bigfoot had a snout, or this Bigfoot kind of looked like a dog a little bit. And so I'm going through my research, my old reports, and it's like these people didn't see a Bigfoot, they saw a dog man because the way they're describing it. Because you have to understand, back in the 80s and even in the early 90s, Dogman was not something that was well known other than like the Beast of Bray Road or the Michigan Dogman. Those are like the two most famous. But in Ohio, we had a couple cases in the 70s called the Defiance, Ohio werewolf case or the Silver Creek werewolf case. And they made national news, but it didn't get to the point out to the people to the point where it was able to absorb into the communities, you know, because a lot of these dogman sightings, like give you an example, the Germantown werewolf here in Ohio goes all the way back to the 70s. It was called the Butter Street Monster, but it was something that was kept in the community. And no one outside the community knew about this stuff because no one ever talked about it because they didn't all want all these people trampling through their yards. And that's how it was with a lot of these dogman sightings. It was stuff that stayed within the community, and it was like their little secret. And what we're finding out now, I mean, it's not even North America. I mean, it's Australia, it's Europe, it's even in Asia that these sightings are taking place.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a worldwide phenomenon. And I do want to touch on when you say like back in the 80s where there was reports of people saying there was reporting supposedly Bigfoot sightings and how it's having canine features. Because I remember I was listening to Tim Kumbo Baker. He was saying for like 15 years he was describing dogman sightings as Bigfoot sightings, but later it came to realization that these were actual dogman sightings.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Kimbo's been doing it. Excuse me, Kimbo's been doing it for a long time. And like I said, he was doing the same thing when he was doing his Bigfoot sightings. And he's taking the sighting reports like me, and you're taking the description, but like I said, you don't even think of Dogman because Dogman was never ever heard of.
Yeah.
You didn't have these werewolf sightings taking place to where you would sit there and say, "Oh, okay, maybe this was a Dogman they seen, not a Bigfoot," because no one even looked at it. And even though when you had cases, I remember like in the late '80s and early '90s, that when someone said they saw a werewolf, no one really took it serious. So
Right.
yeah, so because Bigfoot was the thing.
Yeah, it was. And I feel like most eyewitnesses at the time, too, as well, were more comfortable with saying Bigfoot as well than saying, "Oh, I seen a werewolf," because it's like I don't know, because people are just have that thought like, well, people just don't think I'm just watching too many horror movies if I just say werewolf, or people were just too scared to face ridicule and stuff, especially in those
Right.
times.
Yeah, because when they say werewolf, what do they think of? The Lon Chaney's 1941 Wolfman. I mean,
Right.
that's what people think of. Okay. This werewolf like your Van Helsing or Dogman or Dog Soldier type werewolf, you no one ever pictured it like that until more and more sightings were coming out, with that strong description of the creature.
Exactly. But when we look back in history, these sightings they go back, so far. I mean, I remember this one story I listened to this man named Peter Stump. He was supposedly devil worshiper or sorcerer who claimed to be able to shapeshift into a werewolf using a belt that was given by the devil, and
Right.
he was
Yeah.
able to shapeshift into a werewolf. And it seems like there's also a link connection. I mean, I believe in the supernatural, absolutely, and because I come from a biblical worldview, so I do believe in spirits and angels and stuff like that. And I mean, even the Navajo Indians, as you know about the skinwalkers, they believe
Mhm.
in the shapes witches who make deals with devils, and they go to like cave systems to have initiates go in to perform practices, dark practices from necrophilia, necromancy. All these occult practices, sacrificing a close blood loved one to be able to physically shapeshift into a supposedly werewolf-looking creature. I mean, we
Yeah.
look all around history. There's been stories of shapeshifters, from being in Louisiana, uh, New Orleans. They believe in the Rougarou, the witch you can shapeshift. Um, out there in they call it the Loop Guru.
Lookaroo, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's where the Rougarou originally came from. They migrated, I believe, over from I believe Europe or something like that, and it was brought over to Louisiana culture and stuff. But I mean, there's different variants of these dogs, man. I don't believe all of them are shapeshifters. I believe some of them are born the way that they are, and they just stay like that. Uh, I mean, I've heard stories of how some of these creatures roam with actual coyotes and wolf packs, and people talk about telepathy with some of these creatures as well. And if you could think of like the old cartoon like Aquaman and how he was able to use telepathy to communicate with the sea creatures and able to have them perform and do things that they want, I kind of link that as to how some of these dogmen do as well too. Because I've always wondered how can some of these animals of these what some of these eyewitnesses are saying if how some of these dogmen are able to roam with some of these regular pack of other canines. I wonder if they able to do that same thing too. Because I've listened to so many eyewitnesses. I mean, okay, like two or three, you might say, when they talk about telepathy, but when you get in so many reports of people hearing like a voice in their head or mind speak, I mean, it has to be something to it. Even with the Bigfoot phenomenon,
Hmm.
Uh, I do believe these creatures are flesh and blood. I do believe they can be killed, but I do believe there's a spiritual aspect to these creatures as well. I mean, how can you explain when people are seeing tracks, like for example, seeing snow tracks or mud tracks, and all of a sudden they just disappear as they walked into a portal or something, like they just disappear
Right.
into thin air. Like, how can somebody explain that? You know?
Yeah, it's hard to explain. I mean, there's a lot of supernatural when it comes to Dogman. It's just not flesh and blood. There's a whole large supernatural aspect to it. And we look at all of it because you have to. You just can't say, okay, we're just looking at flesh and blood because you can't because majority of a lot of these sightings are dealing in the supernatural. I mean, we've got reports where people had telepathy conversations with them, or they were walking a trail and then they saw one and it used telepathy to tell the people just to keep going or something to that effect. We get reports like that. I mean, we don't discount it because, you know, we live in a strange world. Anything's possible. So you just can't sit there and say, oh, that's crazy, we're not going to look at that. No, we look at it. You have to have an open mind when it comes to cryptids, because not everything seems to be what you want it to be.
Yeah, exactly. And the mainstream, uh, you know, they the way how our government conditions the masses, we, especially here in America, we all want a logical explanation.
Oh yeah,
If it doesn't fit the scientific logical
narrative. Yeah.
explanation, it gets dismissed, and it's easy to dismiss something that somebody's never experienced. And I do believe there's a whole, as you do as you know too, there's a big government conspiracy to cover up with these creatures. So I mean, they're running the whole mainstream narrative and other places to where this information and stuff is being suppressed. Like there's a saying, public ignorance is the government's best friend, and it's
Oh
a
yeah,
true saying.
yeah. Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Now, what is your wildest government cover up that you came across over the years of investigation in these creatures?
I'll be honest with you. I haven't ran across any government cover up, um, per se. I know like the Department of Agriculture, which is Department of Forestry, and Ohio Department of Natural Resources, or the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources, which is like their DNR. Um, there's cover up in there, and they basically they have to do that, for the safety of the people. But there again, it normally backfires on them. As far as the government, I have a real problem. I'll be honest with you. I have a real problem when I hear a podcast about a guy, talks about how, he killed a dog man and the government came after him because he killed a government asset. Okay, I'm sorry. I I call BS on that. Um, because I don't think these are government assets. Okay. I've had two friendly encounters with the federal government over Dogman. Okay. And and like I said, they're friendly. Um, I've never been threatened by um the federal government. I do know for a fact the federal government is monitoring our website. I do know that for a fact. Our website provider told us it's all the three-letter agencies have been on our website. foreign governments have been on our website monitoring it. Um, so there's interest there. And the way I look at it is, they're looking at us for information as well as to see how much we have also compared to what they have. I don't think Dogman is something that was, you know, brought up in the lab and, they let him out to go terrorizing people or they let him out to monitor them or anything like that. I just don't think they're genetically engineered. I think they're, flesh and blood, and I think some of them are, extraterrestrial in nature, and some of them are, dimensional and comes through portals. But, you can't say that the government wouldn't have interest in trying to weaponize them for military purposes. Now, I'll agree to that. But I just don't think, they took a domestic wolf and a human DNA and put it together and created some monster in the lab. That's like I said, that's my opinion. I don't believe in that. And like I said, I have a real hard problem when people talk about government threatening them over Dogman because, like I said, I've had two face-to-face encounters with the federal government over Dogman, and they were both very peaceful, very proactive, and um, you know, everything worked out. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Uh, so, what is your take when you hear of eyewitnesses of saying that they were told to label their encounter as a black bear, or they are saying this is a pack of wild dogs. Let's look at the what's his name? I mean, we like people like Brenda Hamilton
right,
or Amber Miller or the
right,
Corey Kotze case, and these people's deaths was labeled as a pack of wild dog
right.
attacks. Some were labeled
The,
as a black bear attacks. What is your take on that?
these are not coming from the federal government. Okay, these are coming from city jurisdiction and state. Okay, this stuff isn't coming from the federal government. Um, because like Linda Hamilton for her case, um, is very unique. The whole case itself. Her family even knows that a dog man did it, and they have a petition that they're asking people to sign right now. Um, to have the government. Well, they're saying it's the federal government and the local police admit that it was a dog man that um, killed their mother. Um, but like I said, when I say federal government's not involved, that's kind of a yes and no thing. But let's say when you deal with um, the Department of Agriculture, which is the U.S. Forest Service that handles all that. Yes, that is federal government, but it's not the federal government that you would think like the CIA or NSA or Homeland Security, the one blocking it. It would be more like them blocking it. Um, because a dog being attacked can easily be covered up by a bear attack. Okay, that's
I
the most
agree.
easiest thing to say. A bear attack did it, or a domestic dog, some type of large domestic dog, did it. Um, and that's what they want to use to cover up these dogman, attacks. But when you look at the autopsy reports, even the ones that we have, these coroners are really having a hard time trying to justify what they're trying to say. And that they're being told what to say. And when you look at the diagrams and when you read the report, it's like there's no way a domestic dog did this, and there's no way a bear did it because there's no bears in this area. You
Exactly.
know,
Uh, Not to cut you off, because when they did the autopsy report on Brenda Hamilton, when they said it was a pack of wild dogs that did it, there was no DNA of matching dogs in the area that did that. And even her family doesn't believe one bit that her death was from a natural animal attack.
right? I mean, her own dogs were with her, and
Exactly, yeah.
her own dogs didn't have blood on them or human DNA. Their dogs stayed with her. Um, see, this is where the problem comes with this case is that if she's walking with the dogs and she's attacked, but the dogs weren't attacked. So the most common answer to that is that the dogs ran and the dogs came back after whatever killed her left. Because a lot of people say, well, if they attacked her, why didn't they attack the dogs? Well, the dogs probably got scared and ran
Mhm.
because they weren't big dogs, they were small dogs. And they only came back to her after whatever killed her left. But you know if you read the autopsy report, I mean, my God, um, whatever it was did some nasty damage on this woman.
Yeah, they did. You
Yeah.
know, I- man, it really makes me mad because these victims who were supposedly killed by this bipedal canine creature, my heart really goes out to the families
Oh yeah. Yeah.
because they're told to give a false narrative and to don't further investigate in these cases. As quickly as her case was open, it was closed, so nobody can further investigate it. And it just makes me mad, man. That there's I believe that there's powers that are go to certain lengths to keep this under wraps. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah. I'm working with this one guy who his wife was killed. Okay. Her body was stripped, her jewelry was gone, but her body was just freaking mutilated, you know. And um the coroners, you know, well, let me jump back here. The paramedics that showed up and the police, they both said that, dogs didn't do this. Okay. Dogs, there's no way a dog did this, and there's no bears in the area. Um, and the coroner said, "Oh, it was a dog." Okay, it was definitely it was a pack of dogs, and so he's saying, well, then where's her jewelry and where's her clothes? Okay, and like he said, he wasn't even sure if she even had jewelry on in the first place. But she normally has her wedding band, but she didn't have her wedding band on, and she didn't have the cross that she wore, um, which could have been torn off in the fight because the fingers were eaten off on the body. So if she had a wedding band, it probably ate the wedding band. Okay, because it did eat the fingers, her fingers off. Um, the clothing, that's another part that's kind of a mystery. But what we found out is a month earlier in the same spot, the same thing happened to another woman. So this guy, you know, he's being lied to by the police. Um, the paramedic that told him it wasn't a dog that did this won't even talk to him because the paramedic was told to be quiet. Um, and they won't even give him a copy of the autopsy
Wow.
and stuff. And, it took, he said it took about 3 weeks before they were able to get the body to even bury, and they sealed the cactus, cast, I can't pronounce it. The cactus, they sealed it, and and that was another thing that was kind of odd, about this whole thing. And like I said, to this day, you know, he won't even know what's happened because no one's cooperated with him because there's a neighbor there that had a camera that was right at the area where the attack was, and they confiscated the film on the camera. So there, I feel bad for this guy because he's not getting any answers. And like he says they have been sightings of a large wolf-like creature that walks on two legs in this area. So people knew there was something there, and then you have two bodies, two females killed in the same area a month apart, you know. And they told the lady with the security camera to remove her security cameras. So yeah, there's a cover up right there. I mean, even when he was interviewed by the news, he sat there and said it was a dog man that killed my wife. And they left that part out of the interview. So I mean, it's just it's crazy that you want to cover up something like this, but I can understand you want to cover it up for safety of the people. And again, you don't want a bunch of people running around with guns, you know, going through people's yards, shooting people's dogs or something like that. But you can't lie to the people. You know, tell the husband the truth. All right, tell him don't say anything or whatever, but tell the husband the truth what happened to his wife.
Yeah, at least tell the victims of the family. I can
Yeah.
understand. You don't want the whole widespread, the public mainstream to get involved, but at least
Yeah,
the
give them a
victims.
peace of mind.
Yeah, because it's like how can somebody mourn to that? I can only imagine the type of hell they go through.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
was just talking to Al about this. I have this book called The UFO Silencers. It talks about the MIB by Timothy Beckley. Big time UFO researcher. He's no longer here with us anymore. But that second page of that book, it talks about a 1967 case out in Glacier National Park in Montana, and how the MIB showed up after a supposedly bear attack that attacked two hikers. So it's just it just amazed me. So like, why would these so-called agencies show up on these supposedly labeled bear attacks? You know what I'm saying? It's just more to it. And I'm pretty sure you know about the Knott County in Kentucky attack
oh yeah.
that
Yeah, we
happened
investigated those. Yeah.
with Corey Kotze. You want to give a little insight about that?
Yeah. That was a odd
That's
situation
sad.
because we got a picture of because he wasn't the only one who was attacked. There was a lot of animals that were attacked there also, and we have a picture of like the dead horse, and there's a huge canine print right there by the head of the horse. That was killed. His situation, they covered that up big time because the police were saying, well, that he and his family was part of a dogfighting ring that was taking place. And it was one of the dogs that they have that they used to fight with got out when he was trying to feed it and killed him. But, this thing dragged him like 400 feet up a hill,
Right.
and
That don't make sense. A
it
dog doing
doesn't. No,
that?
because here's the thing. If a dog's going to attack you, he's going to attack you there. Okay? He's going to kill you there. And you're not going to run 400 feet up a hill and not get caught by that dog till you're all the way to the top. Okay? It doesn't make sense. Um, So that was their story. That's obviously a cover up because a horse is a very strong animal, and they'll fight and they'll kill you. Um, I mean, I've seen a video of a donkey killing a mountain lion, just stomping the crap out of it and killing it. Um, but a horse for something to kill this horse and it had to be strong to take it down because you're looking 400 or 500 pounds, horse, and he's going to fight, and he lost his fight. But there, like I said, there's this huge canine print that was right there by the head, and we got a picture of it, and it wasn't um, any domestic dogs that were in the area because we didn't see any, and the deputy that was there, oh, accidentally stepped on it, the print. So, it was a cover up.
I believe definitely. I know this is jumping into a little bit more conspiracy.
No, that's fine.
I'm pretty sure you research about these DUMBs, deep underground military bases, and how there's
Hmm.
been whistleblowers that came out and testified of different lower levels of the base, how the base is at least 4 miles deep. One particular man that really caught my interest about out of all the whistleblowers that came out was Thomas Edwin Costello, a former security officer that
Yeah,
worked out
yeah,
there who got out in 1979, and he talked about these different basis levels, and he talked about one in particular called level 6, Nightmare Hall, and he talked about all these things that he's seen in there from different genetic hybrids of what he believed that the government have gene spliced and created. And he took some papers out of Dose, and later on, he ends up going missing. So, do you think there could be a potential link with dogmen and some of these deep underground military base facilities? Because I looked at an incomplete 1978 underground facility map scattered all across America, and it showed that a lot of these entrances to these deep underground military bases are connected to national park, including Yosemite National Park. So, do you think there's a possible connection to these dogmen and deep underground military bases? Even though I know there's no evidence for this apparently, but I mean, all we have is people who've have insight of these things. Do you what is your take on that?
well, to get back to that security guard, he also mentioned that he saw a guy in a cage. He
Yeah,
said, asking for help, and he gave him his name, and he went to look him up and found out he was missing. Yeah, so they're using humans for experiments and things there. But, you know, I can see the government, like I said, capturing a dog man, capturing a Bigfoot, and trying to weaponize it. Okay. Perfect example. Okay. Everybody's seen the movie The Exorcist. Well, the original Exorcist it was a boy, not a girl. And right now, the boy's bed, the whole bedroom, his dressers, everything is in a storage facility at Andrews Air Force Base or Scott Air Force Base. I'm sorry. And so, why does the U.S. Air Force have possession of the Exorcist, bed and all this stuff, other than try to weaponize it? Okay, that's what they're trying to do with it. They're going to take that dark energy and weaponize it. And I can see them taking Dogman and Bigfoot and weaponizing that into a weapon that they can use, against our enemies or against certain people they want gone. And that would be
absolutely.
the perfect weapon to do it, you know. But will innocent people get killed in the process? Probably so.
I agree. Um, let's talk about that guy you said you had that talk with who who talked about these dog soldiers who claimed he was part of this military operations. I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I spoke at a conference in Louisville, and we went to the restaurant after the conference, and I went up to the bar to get something to drink, and there was a guy there. He had tattoos. He, had a military haircut, and he looked military. And he was asking, what was going on in the hotel, and stuff. And I told him there was conference, a paranormal conference, and he was talking about, joking about ghost hunting and stuff like that. And I was like, no, I do research on, Dogman and Bigfoot. And he goes, Dogman. And I said, yeah, and I kind of explained to him what Dogman was. And we were just sitting there talking, shooting a breeze, talking about our military history and things like that. And, he just sat there and said, look, I'm gonna tell you something. You can, believe me or not. Um, you know, um, I'm, at a military base, and um, I'm just up here, and my job is I go and recover down UFOs, you know, for the government. And um, we have a species that we were in contact with, which was a canine species. They look like wolves, but they're like human, stature and stuff, and they walk like humans, but their features are like a wolf, and they're all the same looking. And he said that they were so dangerous they had to keep them in a facility in South America, and they got out and they were creating havoc and stuff like that. And he was part of the team that had to go down and to eliminate them. Okay. So he was talking about their armor and stuff that they had, and they had special weapons they had to use. But one thing he also talked about was they had a sword that was what he described as like a pharaoh's sword. Um, like you had seen in the movie, The Scorpion King. It's kind of um, odd looking sword. Kind of comes out a little bit with like a crescent moon type blade on it. And he talked about how they had this sword, but they were able to eliminate them. And Linda Godfrey got the same story like a year after I did. And I was talking to Linda at a different conference, and we were talking about it. And she goes, yeah, some guy came to me um, about the story that I met, and it was a totally different guy, because I said, this is what the guy looked like that told me. She goes, well, this is what the guy looked like. So they were like totally different people. So about a year later, I get a contact by a guy that served in Afghanistan, U.S. Army, and he was telling me that they were on patrol in Kandahar, and they were going like up a hill, and the team kind of like broke off. It was him and another guy, and the rest of the team went off on the other side there. And he heard some, you know, faint screaming. So he told the other guy, stay there, let me go up. So he's going up the side of the hill here. And when he gets on top, he says there's three insurgents. Two of them are dead, one is still alive. And he said there's like these two werewolves wearing like body armor, like no helmet, no gloves, no shoes. He was able to see their feet and their hands and their head. But he said one of them had this sword, the same type of sword, and it just split this guy in half with the sword. And he said they both were standing there, and he said the one kind of like took his arm and patted the other one's arm, and they started sniffing in the air. And he goes, well, he thought they might have picked his scent up. And he said they walked off, and there was like a blue light that flashed, and then they were gone. So
Wow.
yeah, that was his story. And like the story I heard before, I haven't even mentioned that. I haven't even gone on to a podcast or even talked about that story. So no one heard me talk about it or heard me even mention that. And then I got another story from a Canadian soldier that served in Iraq in the same area. And they were in a defensive position. And there was like this building that had like a large wall that kind of went around it. And then all these kids start running and screaming. So they're running and screaming. And then all these dogs were running after the kids. And they thought, well, the dogs are going to go after the kids, and the dogs over there, they if they caught you, they ate you. So they lit up the dogs to save the kids. And then like a blue light flash, they said, and they start to see a shadow. So the one guy popped smoke over there. Okay. So they would be ready for whatever came through. And he said it was probably about 10 feet. He said this dog-headed creature walks out of the smoke. And he said it looked like Anubis. And he said it had this cloth around its waist. And it was dark in color. And it was sitting there looking at him. And they didn't open up on it. And then they said it was just, they were looking at each other. And it just kind of like moved back. And then there was that blue flash of light again. Like it was either coming through a portal or leaving through a portal. And it was in the blue light was the portal that was going back and, forth through. And yeah, I mean, those are interesting stories. Um, so there's some type of ancient Egyptian realm to these stories that people are seeing because of the sword, because of uh, the way the creature looks like Anubis. Um, I don't know, man. It's just, I mean, it's strange. It really is.
Well, yeah, well, it's like they say, the truth is stranger than fiction, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
uh, but I mean, we look at through history, like in Japan, for example, I believe it's pronounced Tomio Maruyama in the burial mound. They found a massive 7.5 foot long wavy bladed sword
Hmm.
there.
Oh
So,
yeah,
I mean, you got other parts in the world where people find these giant swords that is too big for humans
a human. Yeah,
to,
they find
to
them in Europe all the time.
yeah. So, I mean, there's stories of giants. And like I said, I come from a biblical perspective. In the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 4, it talks about how there are giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. And so, like we say, they date all the way back to the pyramids. You look at all these archaeologies around the world, these pictographs, and how these people are seeing these giants with 6 digits in their hand,
Yeah,
and
and toes. Yeah,
yeah, and the Bible talks about that in the book of Samuel and other books of how these giants would have 24 digits on their bodies, six on their hand and six on their toes. The native Indians, that whenever they came cross paths with each other, they always hold their hands up to greet each other to make sure that they were regular humans because they
yeah,
were from Nephilim disguise, I believe. As regular humans then, but they could identify them by having six digits on their hands.
yeah,
So I just think that's kind of interesting. And you brought up the Kandahar Valley where these people are seen as dogmen, and we hear about these U.S. Special Op troops that came out and took a. I mean, it's another story, as you know, that they came and took out a giant out there that they also said had
yeah.
6 digits on their hands that had double rows of teeth. So I definitely believe there is a connection with these humanoid looking giants, these dog men. Uh, and I do believe our government, they know a lot about this stuff. I mean, I don't believe all these prominent whistleblowers in the military or claim to be insiders of the government. I mean, even if they did want a publicity for this stuff, what would they gain other than being called crazy? You know what I'm saying? So there
Yeah.
has to be a lot of truth to this stuff.
Oh, there's always truth behind it, you know. Yeah, there's always some type of because this stuff was going on way before the Americans were in Afghanistan. The Russians were even talking about it. The Mujahideen was even talking about it, way before the American involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to talk more about the telepathy things where people have been saying about these dogmen. I'm sure you know this other former officer, Martin Groves, uh, out in the LBL, where he calls it LBR, Land Between the Rivers. Uh, he talked about during his encounters with the dog or with the Sasquatch, at least, because he counted the dogman first, and then had an encounter with the Bigfoot, and he said him and his partner got away, and he said this Bigfoot had communicated with them telepathy and said that we let you get away. So, uh, and this other Bigfoot research, I'm sure that you know, Scott Carpenter.
Hmm.
He's no longer here with us. He collected cases of these Sasquatch communicating with people in a telepathic way, and uh, and I believe just like him, I don't believe people should go out feeding these Sasquatch or anything like that. I mean, I've heard stories of people feeding them, leaving stuff on their property to feed them, and they stop feeding them. They come and vandalize their property. I don't believe these things are the supposed peacekeepers of the woods. I mean, there's stories, of course, where people have traded with these things and fought alongside these creatures and stuff under pact deals. I've heard with Indian
Yeah.
uh, stories and stuff, which I believe is true. But I mean, I've also heard stories of them being at war with these creatures as well too. My personal belief, I wouldn't recommend somebody going up to these creatures and no way, especially women. Uh, I do believe these creatures can detect if you go out in the woods and if a woman's on her cycle and stuff like that,
Oh yeah.
they
Yeah.
could they could pick up on this stuff. And
Oh yeah, definitely.
I've heard tons of cases. Scott, he told this one story of this lady. She was inside her home and how this Sasquatch came on her property because she was in the kitchen and looked through her window. It was two of them, and she saw how one of them was erect and was getting aroused by looking at her. And this other story, he had a report of this lady. She says it was her and her husband. There was out in the woods, and she said she'd been wanting to have a baby for a while. So she seduced her husband, and they made it out in the woods. And after they were done, they've seen these Sasquatch came around, and they lift their heads up and started sniffing the air. And I'm pretty sure I don't need to explain what
Oh
they were
yeah.
sniffing.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've heard stories like that before.
yeah. So, yeah, these creatures, I believe they're doing more than just uh, killing. They're ravishing. They're doing. I believe majority of them are doing nefarious things, and people are. I know people are saying, they want to make friends with the Sasquatch and shake hands with it. I really wouldn't go out there and do that. I do want to have an encounter of my own. I've yet to have an encounter with any cryptid. I mean, the most thing I've seen were like UFOs and shadow figures, and I mean, I've experienced sleep paralysis and stuff like that before, but I've never seen. But when I say I want to see one, I want to be like at a safe hard distance, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah, for sure. I know we run up on time. Scott, is there anything that you want to let anybody know as a closing? You know, uh, as far as like your take on your view on what people should do if they encounter a dog man, or uh, or or
Yeah,
any type.
don't run.
Yeah,
You run your prey.
yeah,
Just stand your ground, just slowly walk away, don't make eye contact, protect yourself if necessary, but the thing of it is don't run. You and like I said, just don't show fear, but there again, don't show aggression. Just, walk away and ignore it. And hopefully it would ignore you.
yeah, absolutely. Because I do believe these things are predators, and